world's most recognized brands, working in over 80 countries in total, and speaking to more than 100,000 people every year. He's got 5 best-selling books, and he's also on the faculty of 5 of the top global business schools. So, Graeme, that's certainly very impressive, and we look forward to hearing all about the future of work today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you guys, and I have this background behind me to pretend that I'm still traveling. It's one of the things I love doing. Technically, my family kicked me out the house into the back of the garage where I built a little green screen. So, but I can still pretend, as we all can. What I've been asked to do this morning, and we're going to make this as interactive as we can. I hope we can have a conversation. We're a small enough group, and feel free to just interrupt me at any stage. We're not going to talk too much about COVID and the implications of what's happening over the next few months or so as we deal with lockdown and disruption and everything else. Although, obviously, COVID is a backdrop to a lot of the conversations we have to have at the moment. But I've been asked, and Andrew asked me to have a look at the disruptions that are coming our way in the rest of the 2020s, and in particular issues around digital disruption and how we should be thinking about it and setting up now. So we're not just waiting for COVID to finish before we have the next conversation, but to actually think about what COVID might be doing to accelerate some of those forces. A few years ago, I was doing a conference at the London School of Economics, and I can technically say I shared the stage with Bill Gates. He was the opening plenary speaker, and I did a small breakout in the afternoon on the same day. I was in his session. I don't think he was in mine. I didn't see him. But he talked about the 2020s. So this is 5 years ago. And he was looking ahead at the decade we're in at the moment. And his argument was that the 2020s were going to be the most disrupted or disruptive decade, certainly in our lifetimes. He argued maybe even further in human history. And his argument then was because there were a whole lot of building blocks that were being put in place. And his view was that we couldn't just look at technology. So we couldn't just look at the internet or smartphones or, in his argument, great software. I'm sure he wasn't talking about Windows. But, we couldn't just look at these different technologies and say these things on their own would make a big difference in the 2020s. His argument was that when you put all of them together, that's when you start to get something interesting happening. And his argument was that when we get to the 2020s, we are going to see systems change. So each of those building blocks, so you add the internet to mobile computing, to automation, to artificial intelligence, you bring all of these things together. And when the system begins to change, that's when interesting stuff begins to happen. And his argument was, we ain't seen nothing yet, right? And I think he's spot on. So give you an example around that. So let's take driverless cars, right? We know that driverless cars are coming. So it's obviously not an if now, it's a when. Yeah, please.
I can't see your screen at all.
Oh, okay.
Andrew, could you maybe stop sharing yours and if I share Graham's?
Perfect. Thank you.
Little square button, just press that and share your screen.
Thank you, and thanks for jumping in. Because you don't have to. You could listen to my voice alone, but I do have some nice visuals in the background, so that hopefully will help. Is that a little bit better?
No. So there's a little toolbar. There's a little square that says share or stop sharing. You've just got to go press that and then select which screen you want to share.
Okay, I'm not sharing a screen though. You just need to see me. So my video is on. Let me just switch it on again. Turn camera off. Turn camera on. So let me get back here.
I think for the viewers, guys, if you just click on the picture of Graeme on the toolbar of Teams, it will then take us to a grid, and we'll be able to see the screen. Well, yeah.
Thank you. Let's get this sorted out here first. Okay. Can you all see me with Bill Gates in my background?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for shouting about that, because it'll be better if you do that. Yeah, I'm using it slightly, just in case you're interested, I'm using a slightly different technique where I've got a separate piece of software that puts my slides in my background, so that I don't share my screen, and that I think is a whole lot easier in terms of your brain. So you're not taking in two separate feeds, you're just looking at me and my background. But it does mean you need to see me. So hopefully that's good now. Okay, we all good?
Yep.
Excellent, thanks. So if we think about driverless cars, right? They're coming, and when they come, they're going to be fascinating. Some of your cars already have driverless features like parking assist and lane control and things like that. But very soon, these driverless cars that have been around for about 10 years, Google has been experimenting with them, and now other companies and Tesla and others have come in. They're not these clunky first editions from a few years ago. They're now promising a proper driverless experience. And in most countries in the world, you still have to sit in the driver's seat, but very soon you'll have cars that have no steering wheels, that have no pedals or anything, proper driverless cars. The real interesting part of this technology, though, is actually not the technology of the driverless cars themselves. It's what happens when you get a driverless system taking place. So the first thing that will happen is driverless cars will become legal. And then the second thing that needs to happen is that driverless cars become compulsory. Because it's only when every car is driverless that you get the real benefit of driverless cars. Otherwise, it's just, the person next to you is driverless. They can read their newspaper or have a sleep on the way home during rush hour traffic. But you're not getting the benefit. MIT has done modeling, and they reckon that we're going to get about a 70 to 75% improvement in traffic flow when the driverless cars themselves can decide the traffic pattern. So you no longer have stop streets or traffic lights. You don't need speed limits. You don't need lanes. As somebody said to me recently, so all cars can drive like the taxis already do in South Africa. Whatever, at least it's safe, right? And what it means is a 72, MIT were quite specific, 72% improvement in traffic flow and a 96% improvement in safety if the whole system is integrated, which probably includes motorbikes, bicycles, pedestrians, runners, all wearing little tags that are then picked up in the system, and the system then manages the efficiency and safety of the whole system. So that the key thing that we're looking for in driverless cars is not to get all excited about the technology of driverless cars. It's to think beyond the technology to the network of driverless cars, the systems change that will happen. Now, just to make sure that you're with me, if you just unmute your microphones, let's have a quick free-for-all conversation. If we had this, right? So sometime in the future, throw your head into the future, and we now have a network of compulsory shared cars. It might be too much of a stretch for you to imagine that South Africa implements this. So put yourself in the London congestion zone. Put yourself in Singapore. I think Singapore is a strong contender for the first country to do this. Put yourself in Germany, where maybe it's the Autobahns and the Berlin and Munich and big cities and so on. So wherever you need to go, every car is driverless, compulsory driverless. And you'll see another word there in my background, shared. The reason I'm saying shared is, if you imagine my system, right, of this compulsory network, the car takes you to your office, then it doesn't have to sit at the office. It doesn't have to stick around all day doing nothing. It can go home. It can take the kids to school. It can pick up some shopping for you on its own. It could even get into the Uber system and make a little bit of money for you. And then at the end of the day, come and pick you up. And if you can imagine that scenario, then you can also imagine that quite a few people might say, well, why does it have to be my car? Why does my car have to drive all the way to the office, then drive all the way home again? Why can't it just be a massive Uber-like network, whether it's Uber or not, just where nobody actually owns a car? You just have this network of shared cars that we hop into. It takes us to our next destination and we hop out. Those of you who love your cars and love driving your cars, you're going to be like horse owners are in the future. You know, horse owners today love their horses, but they keep them on a farm and they go and visit them on the weekend and drive and ride them for a few hours. The car you love driving, you'll keep it somewhere. You'll go and visit it on the weekends and drive it. But this network of compulsory autonomous shared cars, I think, is our future. Now, don't argue with my scenario. Accept my scenario for now. You can argue with it in a moment. Here's the question I want us to go around with. So now you can unmute your microphones. Which industries would be impacted? So don't be shy. So throw out a name or two. Let's cause a little bit of chaos. Which industries?
Public transport.
Yeah.
Manufacturing, the car manufacturing industry.
Yeah. Okay. So all logistics, right? Because we're talking cars. I'm saying cars all the time, but it's going to be trucks, buses, lorries, vans. So deliveries, all sorts of things, all supply chains and so on. Okay, you've started well. You've started in the obvious place, but keep going now. What else can you think of? Insurance is a big one, isn't it? Because, well, there are two reasons, right? The first is if there's a 96% reduction in accidents, that changes the risk profile dramatically. So the insurance premiums drop stupendously. But the second reason is who would own these cars? So I've suggested that we would share the cars, that we wouldn't own the cars. Who might own them? Yeah, you could sort of keep it in-house and it just becomes a leasing option. That's certainly an option. Look, I think that's the most likely scenario for Singapore, to be honest. And it could even be provided as a free service because it replaces public transport. And I could imagine an environment, not a South African environment, but some environments where it might even be a free system that the government provides as not maybe a human right, but certainly a public service. It could be a bank, it could be an investment company, of course. It could be Uber themselves. And by the way, those people who talk about being the Uber of your industry and Uber taking things over, this actually is Uber's ultimate game plan. Uber don't want to take over and disrupt the taxi industry. They want to take over every single vehicle on the planet. That's their actual game plan. And Airbnb have a similar thinking about houses. Why should you own a house? Why don't you just use a house for the time you need to use it, and then when life circumstances change, you shift? It's a very different model, shifting to a shared economy, which the digital world allows you. But here, let's get back to insurance, which is where we were. If there's one or two or three owners of these cars, and each of the owners of the cars owns a fleet of a few million vehicles, who's got the power in the insurance relationship, right? Right now, you probably can't negotiate your car insurance too much, depending on how many cars you've got, I suppose. But I mean, even if you've got 3 or 4, the insurance companies are basically saying, do you want the contract or not? They're not really negotiating on bulk. But if we've got people who own 1 million cars in a fleet, the power dynamics have changed dramatically. So whoever said insurance Insurance is massive. I do work with insurance companies around the world, and I freak them out with this example because their entire model of short-term insurance has to change. What else? Push yourself a little bit. What other examples are?
No need for garages.
Well, yeah. So think about commercial property, right? How many parking bays are there? You know, parking bays at shopping centres. You know, so construction companies need to be thinking this one through.
Yeah, so there's less need for roads or bigger roads.
Yeah.
Parking, yeah.
About 20 to 25% of Sandton's floor space is parking. Did you know that? And so you suddenly discover you've got a 20% glut in commercial property in downtown areas. That'll have a massive impact. So you don't want to be in new construction, but you might want to be in retrofitting when this happens.
I think it's also about content. It's not about a driving experience. You don't buy a BMW M3 as a driving experience. It becomes a user experience. So
Yeah.
the person has content and deliver content into the environment.
And so there's advertising impact, marketing impact. Yeah, exactly. You know, what does Netflix or these companies who produce content for TV, what sort of content do you then produce for a typical car journey or a typical morning commute? And that then becomes a whole new industry that doesn't even exist anymore. I love that. And so the list goes on. When I do this face-to-face, we actually turn it into a little bit of a small group competition. And at the end, I get everybody to count up how many industries did you list. And, you know, in a minute or two, people can get up to 20 industries impacted. The bigger question, the cleverer question is, can you think of any industry that wouldn't be impacted?
The fitness industry. I can't think of any. No, that's not the only one.
Somebody suggested, I can't see your faces, so I'm not sure how cheeky I'm allowed to be here, but somebody suggested once prostitution when I asked that question. And then I obviously said to them, look, I'm not an expert, so, you know, I can't comment.
Drug construction, maybe
Look, there probably somebody suggested more seriously recently dentistry, and I suppose I can't think of how dentists would be impacted by this scenario. But look, I think you get the point of my story. Is almost every industry you can think of, from construction, honestly, to regional airlines. Why would I fly to Durban if I could get in one of these cars? It drives me down, you know, 180, 200 k's an hour. I can sleep on it. Much better overnight experience maybe than going through an airport. And I'm not even talking about COVID, but with COVID, good grief, our lives would be so much easier right now if we had driverless cars that could take us around the country and so on. The point is, every single industry we can think of is going to be impacted. And this is just one example of a technology that we know is coming. The big question is, when is it coming? How quickly is it coming? Is this a 2050s conversation, a 2040s conversation, a 2030s conversation? Or is it possible, maybe not in the complete scenario I've suggested, but is it possible that this might come faster than anybody imagines and it's actually a 2020s conversation? I think it's a 2020s conversation. I don't think that we could sit here today and say this won't happen before the end of this decade. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not exactly as I've suggested it with this complete network of shared cars and so on. But something along these lines is coming, right, in the next few years. And it probably, when it comes, will come faster than anybody could imagine. And it may very well impact your industry and everybody else's industry. So the question, I suppose, that I'm really going to try and answer this morning, using this as an example to get our heads in the right space, is what might be your driverless cars over the next few years? What might be the things that fundamentally shift your industry, that come in as massive disruptors. And over the last 3 or 4 years, since the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, coined the phrase the fourth industrial revolution, we've kind of used this phrase as a little placeholder to talk about this kind of deep disruption that comes to industries. But for me, it's become so much of a cliche that it's almost not worth talking about, because everybody talks fourth industrial revolution, but they don't actually really know what they mean by the level of disruption that fourth industrial revolution applies. And let me prove my point to you by doing a quick history lesson, right? If we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, do you know what the second one was? Or the third one? Because if we don't, then putting a label like fourth on it is kind of fairly meaningless. So quick history lesson. The first industrial revolution started in 1712 when an Englishman named Thomas Newcomen invented this device. It was a steam-driven pump that allowed him to extract water from a Welsh coal mine, and therefore allowed the coal miners to dig the mine deeper and get more coal out of it, so making it, cheaper, better, faster, basically. And within a century, obviously, every industry had been impacted by the Industrial Revolution, with factories everywhere. And that's literally every industry, from transportation to printing, from textiles to healthcare. The second Industrial Revolution began in the late 1800s, but probably is most exemplified by the Ford Motor Company in the early 1900s. It wasn't really actually an invention of new technologies. Henry Ford didn't invent the car. He didn't invent any components on the car. The main thing he did was to change the process in the factory. So what Henry Ford said is, hey guys, we've got a whole lot of factories. We've got a whole lot of machines. We've got a whole lot of tools that we can use, but we haven't actually reimagined the processes. So before he got into his continuous production process, you basically would make a car by taking all of the components, shoving them in a corner, putting about 15 people in the same corner, and 3 days later they had assembled a car for you. And what Henry Ford said is, no, there's a fundamentally different way that you can do this. What we do is we get everybody to specialize. You get 30 seconds to do your piece of the puzzle. We've got to break this production process up into 30-second bits. And then each person specializes and gets better and better and better at just the one thing they're supposed to do. By the time he perfected the system in 1922 with the Model T Ford, they were producing one car every 36 seconds. Car came off the production line every 36 seconds. Still can't be replicated today, obviously because of the complexity of the cars. But the second industrial revolution was not about inventing new technologies. It was about taking the technologies that we have and reimagining how we could work with them. So we're not merely trying to improve what we've already been doing. We are taking the technologies that we've got and we are asking, is there a better way to do what we're doing? Maybe even doing things we've never done before because we've got the technologies. Okay, so a quick chance for you to chat to me again then. If that's the first and second industrial revolutions, what's the third industrial revolution? Yeah, exactly. So the technology, IT, internet, computers, starting in the 1940s and 50s, you then flow all the way through to today with your computing technology, your communication technologies in that. Absolutely. So the fourth industrial revolution then is?
Changing that technology and using it.
Thank you for concentrating and realizing I was doing a history lesson for a reason. Because for most people, the answer, if you ask what is the what are the fourth industrial revolution? It's automation, machine learning, AI, robotics, all the stuff you see on the screen at the moment. And that's what every conference has told you, and that's what every expert has told you for the last 2 or 3 years, and I think they're all completely wrong. Why would robotics not be the third industrial revolution? Why would automation not be the third industrial revolution? It's simply technology, right? New technology. The fourth industrial revolution, I think you're exactly right when you said it, is exactly what the second one was. It's taking the technologies that exist and then asking, what could we do with these technologies? How could we apply these technologies to reimagine the world of work? Too many people, I think, are not reimagining, are not taking the invitation to reimagine the world of work given the technologies that we've got. I had an argument with a bank a few years ago. I was applying for a loan, for a car loan. My oldest daughter turned 18 and I wanted to help her to get a car. So went to the bank to apply for a car loan. And this is a bank I've been banking with for 25 years. And they said, okay, you log into your banking profile, you go online, you click on apply for loan, and a form will come up and you fill in the form, and then we'll see if you qualify for a loan. And the form included, and I'm not making this up, the form, when I went to do that, the first question on the form is, what is your name? And the second question is, what is your date of birth? The form had not even been pre-populated, even though I was in my own banking profile. And initially I thought it was a mistake. I thought surely this form would just be pre-populated and I could literally just check the details and then click submit. It shouldn't take me more than 5 seconds rather than taking me sort of 20 minutes. Went to the second page, so after I'd filled in all of my bio detail, literally the second page asked me, which bank do you bank with? And a drop-down list was there. I mean, it was insane. And then I had finally got to the end, hit the submit button, and I got a message popping up on the screen saying, we'll give you an answer within 3 working days. And I thought, I've banked with this bank for 25 years. Every single transaction, financial transaction, all of my salaries have been deposited into this. My credit card, my debit orders all come off of this bank. What the hell does this bank need to know more than it currently knows in order to make this decision? So because of what I do, I've got contacts with some of the people. I went behind the scenes. I said, guys, explain to me, what's the process here? And their answer was, no, we haven't actually automated the loan procedure. That still goes through the old system of approvals. All we've done is we've automated the form. We've automated the getting of the information, but it generates then a manual thing inside, a manual process inside the bank. This and then they of course will tell themselves, oh, we've got a beautiful app, we've got a lovely website, we've got a great system online, pat themselves on the back and say, look how fourth industrial revolution we are. In my opinion, they're hardly even third industrial revolution, because they've done nothing to reimagine the processes and the systems behind the scenes. If I can give you maybe an example slightly closer to home in the healthcare industry. A few months ago, I felt a little bit sick. This would be pre-COVID, but I kind of had symptoms that today would freak me out even more, sort of scratchy throat and all the rest. And this is what I do for a living, so I don't mess around when I get a problem with my throat. Phone call, booked straight to the doctor, sit down at the doctor, and the doctor goes through the full triage thing that doctors go through. They don't just check in your throat and your eyes and ears. They do blood pressure, they listen to your chest and everything else. And the doctor said, well, I'm really glad that you came in here, Graeme. You wouldn't have been able to fight this off. This is going to need some meds. And he wrote out a script for me and he said, go pick that up at the chemist. You should be fine in a day or two. And as I left his office, he said, nice to see you soon. I kind of looked back at him and I said, well, with all due respect, Doc, I hope I never see you again. My best, you and I are not friends. My best life is if you and I don't ever have to meet. And that suddenly got me thinking. he really, this is no disrespect to him as a doctor, he's a fantastic doctor, super guy, but what he did for me that day could absolutely be done by a machine. The general triage type stuff that your family doctor does, almost always, 90% of the work they do, could easily be done by a machine. You take a smart device that you've got on your arm, it's measuring blood pressure, blood temperature, it's measuring your steps and your health. All of these things are features that already exist. You take your mobile phone, literally it can listen to your chest, and I've spoken to my doctor about this. The microphone here can pick up just as much as a stethoscope can from in my chest. I can take the camera, look into my throat and take a photograph. And the good thing about doing it in an app is that you can keep that stuff on record and you can check it again later in a month's time or 2 months' time. I'm not just relying on my doctor's memory of what my chest sounds like next time I come in to see her or him. We can go a step further. If we give the health data that our fitness trackers are measuring, and we give that to our doctor, and our doctors can see where are you walking, what are you eating. We give them access to our calendars. They can see who are we meeting. A year ago, I had to explain to people what I was talking about. Today, I'm talking about a track and trace app, right? That tracks where you've been, who you've met with, then anonymizing, so I'm not giving private information out, but if I meet with somebody who has got a communicable disease, it would be nice to be notified. And if the machine says that I see you plan to meet that person, it gives me a warning in advance that maybe I shouldn't be meeting with them today. And I just think that it's not a massive stretch for us to see that technology very soon can be used to help us anticipate getting sick. I think it would be a much better thing if my doctor contacted me and said, Graeme, you are about to get sick. Because you see, we don't have a healthcare system at the moment. We have a sick care system. You only get in the system when you are already sick. And what I really would like in the future, and what I think the fourth industrial revolution could reimagine for us, is a healthcare system that gives me preemptive warnings. So my doctor can say, I've looked at your calendar and what you plan to do next week. I'm looking at the weather and the 10-day forecast. I'm looking at patterns of what's happening in our community because I'm your local doctor and we're in the same community. I'm looking at your data, Graeme, your fitness tracker data, and all of this adds up to the fact that you are highly likely to get whatever. These days, of course, it would be COVID, but if it's just a normal flu or even a cold or something, wouldn't it be great if your doctor said, here's how to not get it. Here's how to keep out of the system. Of course, the big question is then how do you pay your doctor if you are not getting sick? And that for me is the greatest reimagining of all, is we shouldn't be paying our doctors when we're sick anyway, because actually there's no incentive, financial incentive, for our doctors to make us well at the moment. Again, I'm not questioning any doctor's ethics, but I'm just saying there's no incentive for a doctor to make us well because they only get paid when we're sick. So the reimagining of the system is you pay your doctor when you are healthy. Every month you get through 30, 31 days of being healthy, the debit order comes off. And as soon as you fall sick, you stop paying your doctor. Imagine how quickly your doctor would come running if that was the system.
Maybe just to challenge that, I mean, how much of that advice do you actually need a doctor for? Because much of what's happening, if you're looking at that aggregated device, the machine learning could tell you that you would get sick. You don't need a doctor to review that information. So
100%.
In many instances, you would need a virtual doctor to deal with 80% of that potentially, not a physical person.
And you're a step ahead of me then, and that's exactly right. That's the next step we actually have to go to. And doctors then need to be thinking. When I say all of this data goes to my doctor and my doctor looks at it, of course I'm not meaning it goes to my doctor, I'm meaning it goes to a computer in my doctor's office. And then I'm not meaning a computer in my doctor's office, I'm meaning a computer system somewhere. And so this is what, in my opinion, this is what medical professionals have to think about. And I genuinely believe that a significant chunk of what is done in healthcare at the moment is open to automation. And we're talking in a moment about the fact that I think that COVID might have accelerated that, because I think that people who a few years ago might have thought I was crazy today realize I don't want to go to see my doctor. Now, if I think I've got COVID, I want to interact via Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. And if the doctor on the other side wasn't a real human being but still gave me the right information, is that a problem? I honestly think we've accelerated this trend by a few years because of COVID. So the words here, and let's have we'll pause in a second here for a conversation. And again, I'm presenting a hypothetical scenario here. I'm not giving you advice for a strategy about automating healthcare. And I've debated with myself quite a lot whether I should use this example. I normally don't use examples from the industry or the people I'm speaking to, because your brains are going to be in the second or third industrial revolution. And what I'm trying to do is open up the fourth one for you. So I'm less concerned about the specifics of the scenario I've just given you, more concerned about the mindset shift. We want an environment that's more proactive than reactive, that's more predictive than responsive, that's more preventative than curative, that's more personalized than generalized, that's participatory, because participatory is probably, I just was on a whole roll of peas there, so I found one that worked. By participatory, I mean a network, a shared system that everybody has to be part of, possibly and probably compulsory, anonymized, but compulsory, so that we get the benefit of big data. But that set of words there could be applied to anything. It could be applied to retail, it could be applied to driverless cars, it could be applied to entertainment, it could be applied to hospitality, it could be applied to banking. So this is a generalized example that I use in many industries to just get them thinking. And then I ask them, what does proactivity mean in your industry? What does predictive technologies mean in your industry? But as I thought about it, I thought, obviously you guys aren't in sort of primary GP healthcare, but it's a close enough analogy for you to think about what are the possibilities, especially in terms of mental health, in terms of therapies, in terms of some of the things that are core to what you do, and some of the things that are things you're thinking about in the future. Yeah, maybe this isn't hypothetical. Maybe this shouldn't just be an example. But maybe there is the possibility of this fourth industrial revolution reimagining, because I don't think there's a lot of technologies that we need more than what we've got right now. I think when a system of these technologies comes together in the healthcare sector, I think we'll see something radical happening. But let me pause for a second and let you come in and comment.
Graeme, for example, for me, the one thing that prevents the kind of movement in certain industries is also the people that monopolize it. So take doctors as an example. So it's a bad example, it's not fair on them, but they make money off you coming to see them for 5 minutes. And 90% of the medication they're prescribing, you could technically go to the pharmacy if the regulation changed and get it over the counter. So take for instance in the UK, you can get antibiotics at the pharmacy without having to go to the doctor. There's some. Whereas in SA, you've got to have a script to get level 2 or schedule 2, schedule 3 medication.
And then don't forget what the whole pharmacy thing was itself. Basically, a pharmacist is the double check in the system. To basically check that the script was done in the right way. Why do we even need a pharmacist at all? If we know that we've got the right pills, just get a robot to go and get them for me, please. So you know that the whole system can change there.
Always, we're talking futurists, so let's think future. I like your history lesson, and if you really look back at human activities, I saw that there has been a social revolution before that was driven by ideology. remember in the 1800s. Then there has been technology revolutions, which was the 3 or 4 phases that we are discussing now. And that was driven by one thing, and it's money. Not ideology, it's been money. It's been driving people, communities, and nations. It's only been money. Even the communist and socialist governments were driven by money, the Chinese and so forth. I think the technology revolution has come to an end. And I think the fourth revolution is the tail end of that small revolution.
Yeah.
The next revolution is a health revolution. I am absolutely amazed in the last few months how money has stopped driving people and nations. And my sense is us. We are smack bang in the middle of the precipice of a total new revolution, which in fact has got nothing to do with the industrial revolution. That is little driven by money. I still folks, I mean, I'm still driven by money, I'm sorry, but that is true. Yeah. But I think we are beyond that. So the question for me in the future is, in fact, very little to do with the technology side of it. That is going to drive, that's going to be the base of it. But what drives the human nature, communities, the future? It's going to be health. What is going to drive the agendas of our customers? And it's not going to be motivating people by money. The question is going to be, how do we get the wellness of people or the health of people? I think we smack bang into the future there. The question I have is, how can we use technology to actually get us to be competitive in that environment? But the whole world has changed in the last few months, and I think we are past the point where, even if I look at my friends, I mean, I've got friends that got 20 or 30 motor cars.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and how in fact the whole world is starting to change. So for me, I think we've actually had a paradigm shift in the last few months. The question for our company is, how do we position ourselves in the future where people are not going to be driven by money, and where companies and communities are not going to be driven by money.
Of course, if I can interrupt there, of course, money, I hear you and I agree with you, and I think that's if we want to, and we don't need to argue about labels, but that might almost be sort of the fifth industrial revolution, and the fourth and the fifth work together. So I like that thought, and it makes sense to me. However, don't push too far beyond people are not driven by money, because of course, even if we're not talking about money driven by the need to get money, there's always a cost-benefit conversation. And so the people, even if the driver is wellness and health and community, organizations that can deliver that in the most cost-effective way are still going to have the advantage. Because even if you're not driven by money, you still have to be able to get the goods and services, and the people who can deliver it in the best, most cost-effective, value for money way are still going to get the benefit out of it. And so for me, it's that whole issue of, you don't just want to look at what is cheaper, better, faster, right? At how what's the right way to phrase it? A lot of what we do in business, in terms of our business strategies, is about working out how to do what we have been doing, but cheaper, better, and faster. And I think that what we are probably going to discover is that, and I agree with you completely, that what COVID has done is it has said that that's not the question people are asking anymore. Maybe better, but not just better of what we always had, but better in terms of things we've never had before, things we've never focused on before. And I think I agree with you. I think there will be a big shift. Thank you.
I think, for us,
It's a great.
Sorry, Miles, you go ahead.
Yeah, Graeme, I'm very interested to hear what you say. So my job, I'm a chief technology officer of a division of a defence company, and my daily role is to work out what is the future of maritime defence, and we do a lot of thinking assessment, and I think the overall message I would say is that the technology, as we see that pure automation robotics in its purest form, is going to take quite a while to come in, much longer than we think. I think what is really interesting, and particularly for ICAS, is the transition between partial autonomy and full autonomy.
Yeah.
So when we get to full autonomy, clearly we have effectively machines making decisions on a lot of our daily lives. But there's this transition phase, which is going to be going across the next 10 to 15 years, where there is a sort of cobotic type relationship, and it's that human-machine interface that is probably the most problematic over the next sort of 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think we're perhaps already somewhat seeing it with COVID. I agree it's speeding up the technology trends, and it's from a mental well-being, it's that challenge between humans being able to interact together to make decisions, and then remote humans, and that's a real technology challenge, jump that you're right. I think it absolutely is throwing out many opportunities, and I think in the short term, next 10 years, I think as that jobs market, particularly the let's call it the middle class jobs market, starts to get roboticized, the lawyers and that sort of thing, I think there is absolutely a clear opportunity there for particularly mental well-being is going to be a huge growth area as the disruption comes and as people progressively have to work more closely with machines.
And Mars, I agree with you completely, and this is really where I wanted to push you, and in a moment I'm going to give you, just without much explanation, because I think you'll get it, 7 principles that I think will guide that transition period, and are 7 building blocks that you guys can look at in more detail. Because and this is where I wanted to push you in that transition phase, in that hybrid between sort of complete automation and where we are now. I think the companies that will be most successful are not the companies that focus on doing what they've always done, but just better with the technology. That's one thing you need to do, but I think that's the easiest thing to do and the most obvious. What I'm trying to help my clients to do is to push further and say, where's the reimagination? Where's the possibility to do things that haven't been done before, to do things in ways that haven't been thought of before? And I think that's where the real competitive advantage is. So yes, we've got to go through this era, this transition era, and we've got to get better at doing what we do. But I think that's the easy piece. The strategic piece is this reimagination bit.
I think also, Graeme, just to add there to what Miles was saying, that I think as the clinician in me, I think sees almost the knee jerk to the automation, to the sort of future in terms of that, in the systems, the knee jerk for craving human interaction, craving closeness, craving connectedness. And I think COVID has shown us that we're connecting remotely more than ever, yet we have also felt the distinct absence of physical connection, of a hug, of this and that and whatever. So there is that need. And I think, Barney, going back to your point, I think that's where this huge opportunity, I think, is for us, that we can use the automation to minimize costs, to look at what can be replaced, but we can bring in that end piece that people will crave more than ever. Because we in some ways dehumanizing our world, and we can bring that element at the same time. So we can really benefit from the one and bring the other. And I think really serve as an important need there.
100%. Let me quickly, I am watching the time, and I took slightly too long with my opening example of cars. I get excited about driverless cars. Let me give you these 7 principles quickly. And as I say, I mean, each of them we could spend an hour debating. I just want to run through them. I think you'll understand them. I don't think they need much more explanation, but if at some stage you want to go through them in more detail, we can maybe set that up. But I think these are the 7 foundations. As we've looked across different industries, across the world as a team over the last few years and looked at what are the clever companies doing really well right now in terms of this reimagination. Here they are. So the first is data. Obvious place to start. Too few companies are recognizing just how important accessing data, using data, making data the heart of your business. Yes, we have databases. Yes, we know that. Yes, we should be cleaning up our databases and doing a little bit more with them. But once you begin to have a look at it, just a fascinating example. So Fitbit took their California data to Google. They asked Google, do you think you can predict heart attacks? 3 weeks later, Google came back and said, no, we can't predict heart attacks. There's not enough causation issues, lots of correlation that we can see, but we can't predict. What we can do, though, is we can predict earthquakes. Can you imagine? What had happened is they had seen spikes in Fitbit's data. Remember, it's California. They had seen these weird spikes, and it was happening on everybody's data. And they thought, what is this? And they checked all sorts of correlations and causations, and eventually they had mapped it, and the AI did this, mapped it to earthquakes. And when an earthquake happens, obviously your heart rate, you get a bit of adrenaline juice and your heart rate bumps. And they were able to map the geographic location of where people were in relation to the earthquake epicenter. And then they discovered that the people's heart rate spiked 3 seconds before the earthquake actually hit them. And this happens in animals. Birds fly, cats and dogs disappear, and 3 seconds later the ground moves. There's some sonic boom that happens that we can't hear, animals can, our hearts can, and they would never have known this. This is not just taking your data and being more efficient with it. This is employing people in your business who I call data detectives. People who are not trying to improve your business by looking at your database and finding new products to give to old customers or whatever you do with your data. It's literally employing people whose job it is to get excited. They're data nerds, right? And you give them a pile of data and you say, tell me something about this stuff. It's an example of what I mean by data being the most important thing. But you've just got to make a hell of a lot more of data than you can. Then Miles, this comes to the point you were making. AI is a big thing, artificial intelligence, but I don't think AI is the big news of the 2020s. I think IA is more important than AI. AI is machines, machine learning, making decisions on their own. I like to talk about IA. I think the next 10 years is going to be about intelligent assistance. So we're not going to replace people with machines, but we are going to make people in our systems much, much, much cleverer. And that includes our own staff and it includes our customers as well. The third principle is that those companies that are being successful in the digital age are the companies that are building platforms. They're not just creating products and services, they're building platforms that other people can play on as well. So Amazon and Alibaba are your massive examples, but there are lots of other examples about building platforms. A quote from The Economist a few years ago is still valid. Real innovation in the 2020s is not merely about new products, new services, new channels to market. It's about your ability to change your business model itself. And I think the biggest shift is to think of yourself as a platform. So you don't control, you don't manage everything. You build a platform on which a whole lot of other people can play as well. It's certainly, if you can do it, it's the easiest way to unlock value in a system and to own the system. Fourth principle is slightly smaller, but still interesting, the concept of gamification. Using the principles and psychology of computer games to get people to behave in certain ways. Probably in your industry, Vitality is the best example, giving out points, and now of course Discovery Bank doing the same thing, points for behavior change. And it's leaderboards and gamification strategies are just unbelievable in the digital space. The fifth principle is personalization. If you're doing all of the other stuff I've talked about, there can really only be one reason you're doing it, and that is to make sure that you are dealing with markets of one, and that everybody feels that what I'm getting in my phone is for me and me alone. I'm not in a one-size-fits-all contract anywhere. The sixth principle is, it could be phrased in different ways. I like to think of it as the principle of constant upgrading. The way our model of the world works at the moment is you upgrade your systems, you upgrade your terms and conditions, you upgrade the contract terms, once a year, annually? Whereas every single time, I can go and check it now, every single time I switch on my phone, there it is, top corner over there is the App Store, and this morning I have 5 apps ready to upload. Let's see which they are. Airbnb, shame, they're struggling. Strava. That's my running app, has an update today. I'm not going to check now what it is, but I'm excited. I use Strava every other day as I go out for a run, and they've added some great functionality. The last time Strava updated was about 10 days ago, and then 10 days before that, and about 2 weeks before that. What can you do to give people a sense of constant upgrading? Now, sometimes that means you're experimenting, right? And sometimes the update comes in and the app crashes. Garmin crashed on me last week. And then a day or two later, they fix it and they say, sorry, we had a little bit of outage there. And I say, okay, no problem. I'd much rather you were in experimental mode and constantly upgrading for me than we were in only getting an upgrade once a year. And then finally, and this comes to the point, Vipka, that you were just making, my 7th principle is that we need to be more human. Yes, let the machines do what the machines can do, and let them do all of the behind the scenes stuff, let them make the decisions the machines can make, but where's the humanity? Where's the human touch in our system here? And as I say, if I know we don't have the time this morning, my goal this morning was just to kind of catalyze some thought, but obviously each of these 7 things could really be a deep dive conversation. I've got lots of examples I could give you if you wanted them. These are, I think, the foundations on which disruption is going to be built. And if you as a team, if you as an organization unpack each of those, and you can probably add 3 or 4 extra ones yourself that are more industry specific for you. But if you unpack those, I think those will give you a sense of where you can start with reimagination. And if we then add the layer of COVID on top of this, then I think COVID has both exacerbated and accelerated almost all of those trends. Well, then you can see that we are in for a hell of a ride in the 2020s. And we need to make sure that we are not just doing what we've always done, but slightly better with technology, but that we're actually getting ahead of this digital disruption that's coming our way. So that was what I wanted to share with you by way of getting your thoughts going. We've got a few more minutes now. If there are any other comments or questions that come my way.
Great. We can't see the hands up, so please go ahead.
Yeah, just dive in.
I suppose one point from my side is actually the social implications of all this, and how governments and enterprises have to adapt to this. So you talk about disruption to say doctors, but obviously what we're actually going to see very soon, obviously in the US, for example, is truck drivers, largest employer. If truck driving, you have 5 million unemployed, how does the state look after that? Yeah. So the pressure on state funding, pension funds, healthcare systems, work weeks will move from 40-hour weeks to 20-hour weeks. You're going to have a lot of social time. That social change will be a big catalyst for a lot of positives, but also negatives.
Huge, absolutely huge. And there will need to be a whole lot of retraining and so on. If we had more time, we could, that car example, I often stretch out to a 45-minute conversation, because what most of us thought about with the driverless car system I gave you was all the jobs that might be lost, right? So we don't need emergency nurses anymore. We don't need traffic officers. We don't need construction. But what jobs would be created, right? in IT security, in reconfiguring cars, so engineering, IT, and so on. And you're absolutely right. We've got to look at those examples in every industry and realize there are going to be people that are no longer needed in the system, but there are also going to be lots of opportunities for new things that emerge. And I really do think that this certainly plays into your space, because the need for people to help people, if you want to use words like coaching, mentoring, training, developing, but then also therapy, counseling, psychology, mental health, wellness, community development. There's a whole word cloud there that really looks in your favor, and I think is worth looking at.
A question of pure interest. Do you believe in the singularity?
Yeah, if we're talking about the same thing, yes, I do believe that computers, I do believe that computers will reach the point where they are more intelligent than human beings. And in fact, we'll go further. Within my lifetime, I think we'll get to a point where a single computer will be more intelligent and more powerful than all human beings combined. So if that's what you mean by the singularity, I think it's coming in my lifetime.
Mark, I think from my perspective, in my household, we've already hit that singularity.
Yeah.
Graeme, in terms of my feedback of your 7 points now, I was delighted to see that pretty much all of those we'd considered as part of the platform design that we considered for ICAS. So that certainly the gamification, building the platform and allowing others to operate upon it, etc., and weaving in AI. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. No, and thank you for that feedback. Obviously, Andrew and I had a good chat in advance of this, and as I said to him, the job that I do, the work that I do as a futurist, and in fact, just let me put up my final slide if you're interested, just my contact details if you want to just take a note of those and connect. I genuinely, I wasn't just sort of riffing on that fourth industrial revolution thing I showed you. I genuinely don't believe that we should be spending all of our energy and effort right now as humanity looking for new technologies. I think we've got most of what we need. I think the building blocks that most organizations need for success in the 2020s already exist. The key thing is this mentality shift to say, give ourselves the permission to reimagine, to do it differently. And the solution is not massively serious singularity-driven, supercomputers that cost multiple millions of dollars. I think a lot of our solutions already exist. And it's simply a case of seeing the system, pulling the system together, as I started with Bill Gates' thoughts. It's not the technologies that are the clever bits now. And so I didn't want to come with a whole lot of clever stuff you never heard of before. I basically just wanted to remind you that it's about a systems change. That's going to be the secret, I think, to your success.
Fantastic, thank you.
Great. I know that we are pretty much out of time. So just an opportunity to say thank you so much for that really great food for thought, and much appreciated, and a good foundation for us to work on going forward.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to just sort of catalyze something. I hope it did what you wanted it to do and get you thinking in the right direction. And hopefully we stay in touch and we see what cool things you guys come up with in the next little while.
Great. Thank you, Graeme.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.
All right. We have scheduled